everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CleanTechies the Podcast. Today is a little bit of a special episode, not dropping on the usual schedule. But the reason we're doing this episode is one to kind of go through a rough introduction into what CleanTech is and what we mean when we refer to it. Because there's some people who aren't totally familiar with the terminology in general. So I wanted to just kind of take some time to run through the main areas of CleanTech, at least in my mind. Again, it's defined differently depending on who you are, but just to kind of give you an idea of where I stand on these things. And of course, before we get into things today, I want to mention that the episode is brought to you and sponsored by NextWave Partners. NextWave Partners is a CleanTech, renewable energy and infrastructure recruitment firm globally, serving companies globally, whether you're a small business growing or you're a large business looking to enter a new market. NextWave Partners is a great solution to your talent needs. So reach out to NextWave Partners. You can learn more at info@next-wavepartners.com. So let's jump right into things here. Let's start with, I think, kind of what some people I think misunderstand or maybe don't quite connect the two dots, which is clean tech and sustainability essentially go hand in hand, right? A lot of people might not recognize that. They might not know it because they haven't studied it or dove into it very much. But really, my understanding of sustainability is a lot of people think it's separate because they're focused on just kind of recycling and reusing things, which is obviously part of it. But clean tech, or sometimes referred to as climate tech, in the past it was green tech. Those are the new technologies that are really being built to take the sustainable mentality and to create a cleaner and greener world where we're using less electricity, we're reusing the things that we do use, or we're taking things that we do create with the end in mind so that we know, okay, what is the end of life use going to be for this, right? I think an example that we had on the podcast was Mighty Buildings. We had them on, and they're starting with their 3D printing of homes with the technology in mind that at some point this material is going to, we can't use it anymore. So we need to make it in a way that we can reuse it for another building in the future. So just kind of that idea of sustainability is connected with clean tech, right? It's all the same thing. So if you consider yourself somebody who's interested in sustainability, clean tech is part of that. It's just the technology side of things where they're inventing new technologies and taking what we have and making better use of it. One thing I did want to maybe touch on too is kind of the history of the terminology here. So there's a lot of different things. Obviously, clean tech itself, the word, no space between clean and tech. It's very influenced by the technology sector, but there's a little bit of a difference here. So what I've understood, I've been always very interested in the startup space in general and seeing how tech companies are built, where it's really about finding a team of people that's very capable of finding a problem and then building a solution to that problem based off of what the users actually tell them. Now, the situation with clean tech and green tech is that you need to have the technology right, because we already know the problem. The problem is we need to reduce emissions or capture carbon, whatever it is. We know the problems are identified typically. We just need to find technology that actually accomplishes that. So it's sometimes a matter of finding a new team for the technology rather than the other way around. So this is actually, back in after the tech boom, there was the green tech kind of boom and bust that people talk about. And there were some people who went through that. They were kind of the OGs of clean tech. And that was oftentimes referred to as green tech. And sometimes green tech will encompass renewable energy too. Solar panels, wind farms, that kind of, energy side of things. But normally when I'm referring to clean tech, I'm talking about the next step in creating a carbon neutral future or a circular economy. It's what we're looking for. So going back again, green tech was kind of what was expected. The technology companies and the investors invested in companies and tried to do things the same way that tech companies did them, but ultimately realized that wasn't the case, that they couldn't expect things to go the same way. And that's why there was a lot of failed investments, honestly, during the Great Recession, during the recession that we had in 2008, through 2010. So that was a tough time. Oftentimes, I think, at the time that was referred to as green tech kind of shifted into the terminology of clean tech. And what I'm seeing a lot these days is reference to what we're talking about in terms of climate tech, because it's all oriented towards helping reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, et cetera. So that's kind of the quick history. And then to go through kind of the main areas, again, these are the areas that I'm familiar with. There's obviously going to be areas in the following that aren't even referred to yet. So it's going to be a continually changing space, but kind of where I understand the space is right now. Here are some of the main areas and just brief explanations as to what each area is from my limited understanding at this point. So just to your, so again, broadly speaking, within green technology, green energy, clean tech is the renewable energy space, right? Again, generating energy through solar panels or wind. There's tidal energy, obviously hydropower. There's all kinds of different energy sources. There's even waste to energy. So lots of really interesting technologies there, but that's kind of the energy sector, which I generally kind of leave outside of the clean tech umbrella, just given the fact that it's a pretty well-established market, right? It's very straightforward how to build a solar farm and a solar plant and to generate energy. So that's kind of, it's well established. There's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's pretty well established. The clean tech side, in my opinion, is the technologies that still need to be refined in order to accomplish this circular economy, which we can get to in a bit. So another big area in the clean tech sector is transportation. So that would include e-mobility, obviously reducing car usage and vehicle usage in large cities through use of either public transportation or scooters or whatnot. There's a lot of things. Obviously, Tesla falls into this transportation with electric vehicles. I think it's important to mention, along the lines of that too, is that having an electric car is great, but why not have no car if you don't need to, right? I know a lot of people, I'm from the Midwest originally, so there's really no way. I mean, there is a way, but it's not great to get around without a vehicle. But that's kind of the problem we need to solve with transportation in general, is taking the actual embodied carbon levels down in general, because even a Tesla still has quite a bit of embodied carbon, especially when you're considering the mining activities that go into creating and building these batteries. So that's kind of that area in general. There's a lot of very, very interesting companies in the clean transportation space, to be honest. It's a space that has, I think it's probably, a little bit more mature than a lot of others, but there's going to be so many innovative things coming, especially with public transportation and how these things get integrated, which we'll talk about in a bit too. Another big area is carbon sequestration or carbon capture. So sometimes these are referred to just broadly as carbon tech. That's typically how I'll refer to it. But carbon sequestration is taking and planting trees, and trees obviously capture carbon out of the air. So that's one thing. A lot of times people equate environmentalism and helping clean up the environment to just planting trees, which that's definitely one thing. But there's a lot more than just that, right? There's companies that will capture carbon at smokestacks of coal factories, for example, right? There's a company called Carbon Cure Technologies that I interviewed the founder of, and they're capturing these byproducts, fly ash and the carbon with it, and they're putting it together with the byproducts. They're capturing the carbon, putting it with the byproducts to create this basically this material that looks a lot like plastic in its basic form before it's formed into any shapes. And from that, they can create real products. So they're taking carbon out of the air, which is obviously doing us a favor with reducing total carbon output. And then they're actually making valuable products that can be sold into the economy. It's creating another revenue stream for businesses that are having these carbon emissions, right? Instead of just paying carbon taxes, they can actually capture it, pay less carbon taxes, and then sell that carbon as just a base product. They don't have to manufacture those things. They can just capture it and then sell it to the other companies that will inevitably come up to meet the demand of building products out of carbon and byproducts that are put together. So it's a very interesting space. You'll probably notice, this is an example of carbon offsets or carbon sequestration. Is when you're purchasing flights, you can, I know specifically with Delta, you're able to purchase carbon offsets for your flights, which is a very important thing that we can all do, especially people who can afford to do it should be doing that. And that's essentially, they've partnered up with companies like Pachama, who is a really super innovative company, very cool. Diego is doing some really cool stuff there. That they verify and they make sure that trees are being planted, that actually when you put your money into these carbon offsets, they're actually being used properly, because there has been a lot of abuse of carbon offsets in the space, with companies just trying to make a buck and not really verifying what they're doing. So that's one huge area, is just carbon tech in general. There's so many interesting things that are coming out of that. I'm super excited for that space. It's just booming right now. I'd say Canada is one of the leaders in carbon capture technology. I know I also spoke with Jennifer Wagner of Carbon Cure Technologies. They take carbon and put it into concrete, which actually makes the concrete stronger and it mineralizes it permanently. And it reduces the amount of cement they need. So then it reduces the price, making it about the same price in general. So just very cool things in the carbon tech space. Another huge area is built environment. So this can refer to a lot of things. Generally speaking, it's focused on how we use the spaces we already have. So specifically in urban areas, even not so urban areas, this is important. But basically taking our spaces and utilizing them in ways that is very energy efficient, finds ways to recycle and to use things that we use on a daily basis. For example, an idea that could be encompassed in built environment would be where park benches, for example, are made out of solar panels, or roads could be made out of solar. I know there's a place in Spain that has sidewalks that are made out of solar tiles. There's also one where the sidewalk tiles are, they create energy when you step on them. So it generates a little bit of energy that way. Some of these things, a little bit more obscure at the moment, haven't been really proven as technologies, but built environment is, again, referring to that in general. There's some pretty interesting stuff out there already. I think Singapore is a great example of a city that's implementing a lot of built environment technologies and ideas already. So that's kind of, again, smart cities and built environment kind of go into each other a little bit, which is the same with a lot of these technologies. A lot of them are really kind of spilling over into each other, because we're trying to get to the circular economy, where we responsibly get the limited materials that we have with the earth. We build them in a way with the end in mind, so that we can use them. Once they're finished being used, we can use them for something else. So it's kind of completing the circle. And the goal is to get to a point where we can essentially use everything, right? Such great efficiency that everything will be used. That way we're not wasting anything. So going into smart cities, there's a lot of factors that go into this, into what a smart city really looks like. Again, Singapore being a great example of this already is, and it's tied in with IoT, which is also a separate sector, but basically building cities in a way that is very energy efficient. It's going to reduce, carbon reduce usage of vehicles through increased and improved public transportation. So that way you're encouraging people to walk or to use public transportation or e-mobility, as well as taking the energy, again, goes into the built environment piece, using the energy that the cities are already generating from, taking and capturing, for example, the heat that air conditioners produce, and capturing that to be then used later on to heat water, for example. So there's a lot of things that go into it. Really, another big aspect is utilizing solar energy space on rooftops, and then capturing it at batteries, and then getting the city to be more reliably disconnected from the grid if possible, so that in the event of major outages or disconnections, for example, the city will be able to sustain energy usage. And a lot of this too is going to optimizing the energy demand. So getting appliances to really understand, okay, be smart and realize it's peak energy demand. Let's make sure our wash machines don't run until the evening or till the middle of the night when things are not running. So we can kind of start to level out this energy demand, which really goes into the greater energy grid aspect, which is a very fascinating subject in general on itself by itself. But yeah, that's going to be smart cities and smart grids in general. It's just kind of utilizing this energy and creating a more reliable grid. And oftentimes, smart grid and smart cities could be remote communities too, right? There's mining camps out in the mountains in Canada where they don't have a reliable connection to constant energy, so they have to they have to set up their own generation systems with wind or solar, and then have batteries to store the energy. So another very interesting note on smart cities is there's a company called HydroStore, which is essentially compressing air using a water-based system, if I understand correctly, that is gravity fed through the extra energy that's created. At peak times, at non-peak times, the extra energy being generated, and then they're able to discharge a significant amount of energy when they need it from these batteries. So it's very long-term storage of energy. It's a very simple type of technology, but very, very cost effective to build, and it can produce significant amounts of energy. So I'm very excited to see that technology come to fruition. Another huge area is clean ag or clean agriculture. A lot of times people will call ag tech, but ag tech doesn't necessarily refer to the clean versions of agriculture. It's oftentimes referring simply to the technology within agriculture. So this one's very special to me because I grew up the son of two farmers. My mom and dad both grew up being farmers, and I spent about 7 months on my aunt and uncle's farm. So seeing these agriculture practices come up that really are a huge factor to helping create and draw down the energy usage, draw down the greenhouse gas emissions, and sequester the carbon is very interesting. There's a great documentary out there called Kiss the Ground. I don't know if it's still on Netflix or not. It was when I originally saw it, and it describes how the practices of industrial farming are really harmful to the environment in general. So this is something a lot of people have a misconception, is that you can't eat beef, for example. That's a lot of us, like, people want to be like, oh, let's go vegan because we don't want to eat animals because it's harming the environment. It's really not actually harming the environment necessarily. The way it's being done is harmful to the environment. But if cattle are raised at the places that they actually eat their food, rather than crops being grown in industrial settings and then shipped across the country to a place where all these cattle are in a pen, and then there's all this manure piling up, creating methane, that's bad. But if we go back to the basic ways of farming, we can, actually reduce that methane ever being released, because it's a more distributed. It's not as concentrated with all the cattle, and then on top of that, the soil itself becomes healthier and actually takes carbon out of the air. So that's a very interesting space to me. There's some really cool companies too doing vertical growing, such as App Harvest, where they're able to use significantly less water in terms of growing these plants, in big controlled environments. So this is obviously a little bit of a side tangent, but there's something Elon Musk's brother, Kimball Musk, has a company that's developed technology that is essentially it's a container that has, obviously, in a controlled environment where they can grow plants from anywhere around the world could grow, because they can control the environment to make it exactly like that of Italy or of Florida or wherever they grow these things. So it's a very interesting technology in general, is that you can control the environment, producing healthier plants that don't require pesticides, all organic. So that's a very exciting space to me, also encompassed in the clean tech space. And then clean water. Clean water is another really big one. It's important to mention most Americans have not experienced issues with water in their lifetime. I mean, some people have, obviously, but there's a lot of us who have never experienced that. And this is something that is going to become increasingly difficult as climate change issues continue to expand and to plague our land. And it's going to be a need not only to get water in general, but to get clean water. So there's a lot of companies out there that are either capturing water directly out of the air at any temperature, There's a company called Source Energy. There's also a company called Water Harvesting that do these things. So there's some very interesting technologies there. But it is a very important aspect is to have clean water for us, right? We want to be able to have water for everybody. Water is one of the most essential items in the world, essential things in the world for everybody to have. So this is also a very, very interesting space as well within the clean tech side of things. And then there's waste management, which is I would consider its own category. So again, it's a lot of this is really a lot of the sustainability side of things where it's what are we going to do with products once they've been used? How are we going to recycle them? Are we going to upcycle them? There's a lot of clothing companies that are being worked out to develop clothing that's because again retail clothing is it's not very good for the environment. The fact that people just go through clothes on a super fast basis, it's not great. So there's all kinds of initiatives there to help repurpose and upcycle, which is a technical term that a lot of people are using. Is instead of recycling, upcycling, so taking things and making them other useful and valuable things. An example of this, I think, if I remember correctly, either Adidas or Nike had taken some of the ocean plastics and plastics that had been, just wasted into the ocean, and then use that in their shoes. So there's some examples of this being done currently, and I would say that it's a very similar aspect to the carbon capture space, right? Well, they capture the carbon, put it with the fly ash or other byproducts, and then they turn it into something else. It's a very similar type of thing, but oftentimes, this waste management / upcycling side of things is referring to other things, other used items. And then there's another big aspect, which is this is the technical side of things in clean tech in general, is verification process. So it's really verifying that what we're doing is actually what companies claim they're doing is actually being done, right? Making it like Pachama is a great example of this, where they took the carbon offset space, which was kind of like the Wild West and unreliable, and they made a way. They formed a partnership with correct satellite devices and companies to make sure that these things were actually being done. And there's going to be an entire industry of businesses, tons of jobs that are created to support this space of verifying that companies are actually building things sustainably and that they're actually having a low embodied carbon price, right? So making sure that everything is very, very clear and transparent to us, because as consumers, it's very important that we can see, just like we see the nutrition on food, that we can see what is being done and how these companies are creating their products, so we can make a decision. Another huge aspect, a lot of people are very excited for this, and this can be sometimes separated from clean tech, but it's generally a huge part of clean tech. Is the Internet of Things, the IoT. Essentially using devices of all sorts and the things that we use on a daily basis to track data and then draw out of there ways that we can improve. So an example is understanding, for a lot of local municipalities will do this, where they do a study on road usage, and they'll say, okay, is this road, they'll put out some trackers to find out how many cars drive on this road per day. They do it for like a month or so, a few weeks, and then they're able to decide, should they increase the size of the road or should they reduce the size of the road? Do we need that much? What's the trend? But if we can take these once a year studies, once every 2 year studies, and these type of things, and get all this data on a much more direct, very quick feedback loop, we can adjust a lot faster. So with IoT, we can track not only broader trends, but we can also track smaller things such as energy usage in certain, for example, I'm in New York City, in certain boroughs of New York, or certain neighborhoods within each borough, of how much energy is being used here this day or this time of day. And then from there, companies can innovate ways to try to adjust those things. And we can make decisions as consumers as to, should I use this? Should I wash my dishes right now? Should I run the dishwasher, or should I do it in an hour? right? These are just small things that very important and that are very important for us to do. But the IoT sector, these very small tracking devices, is going to be a very vital aspect on how we actually are able to achieve that. Another pretty large aspect of clean tech is cooling. So I think we kind of alluded to it earlier with, as you probably know, refrigerating units, air conditioners, all these things that cool. A lot of them have a man-made chemical in them that has a massively larger amount of emitters of greenhouse gases than just standard carbon, because it's a specific type of specific type of chemical that is way more harmful for the atmosphere. Even though a very small, like physically, amount of these things are emitted, it's very detrimental to the atmosphere. So finding ways to still cool our homes and to keep our food from spoiling. Again, going back to kind of the idea of reducing waste. It's a big part is food. Food is a huge aspect, which we talked about. Clean agriculture, that falls into there as well. Cooling is a big part, and there's a lot of interesting companies. There's actually a cooling prize that was generated for basically a competition to help companies. Whoever won was the most innovative at reducing the electricity used with air conditioning units or cooling units, as well as kind of the output of how they're disposed of, right? So there was actually this is a pretty big development in India right now, because of their constantly growing and kind of becoming rising from the ranks of a third world country to a first world country. A lot of people are buying air conditioning units as kind of one of their first purchases. So a company, Gree and Daikin Global, were the two companies that actually won that prize. I don't remember the exact amount, but essentially, that's a big space that has a lot of room for innovation at the moment, and I definitely think it's one to be included in this breakdown. Another large aspect, and I think this is kind of the final one, but it's very big. It's a very broad too, is supply chain. So if you can think about all of the things, all of the building materials that go into the construction of a vehicle or a house or apartment building, all of those materials, those things need to be sourced responsibly. So there's a huge aspect. This is a very broad stamp, just saying supply chain in general, but the supply chain in general is a huge aspect of how we can also, create a more circular economy. So it's going to involve not only responsibly sourcing the materials and mining them or whatever we do to get those materials, but also trying our best to source them locally, or creating products that are byproducts of used things, right? Do we really need steel for these things? Are there other types of materials that we can create or engineer that are as strong as steel? Because steel is one of the big it's a really tough space, because you can't really make steel without significant heat. And obviously you can't get significant heat without either massive amounts of electricity usage or burning coal, for example. I know Bill Gates has a company that uses AI technology to concentrate solar energy and direct heat from the sun to be able to create steel, but it's not super reliable at this point, given the fact that the sun is not always shining and you need consistent heat to create steel. So that's one area. But there's so many things in supply chain that need to be innovated. Just imagine everything from everything that's around you, the computer you're watching this on, or the phone you're listening to this on. All of those materials need to come from something, and we need to create and innovate the way we take our supply chain, so that way we can create the circular economy, so we can get to this point. So with that, that's pretty much, those are the main areas. Again, just to recap them, the main areas of clean tech, in my estimation, are clean energy, clean transportation / electric vehicles, carbon tech or carbon capture, carbon sequestration. Those are big areas. Built environment / smart grids and smart cities, clean agriculture, clean water, waste management or upcycling, verification of the technologies, and IoT, cooling, and supply chain. Again, very broad. Many people might have some things to add, and if you do, feel free to drop them in the comments. Again, this is a tough space, right? There's a lot of things that are not mentioned here that are definitely going to be part of this whole transition to create a greener and cleaner future. But I wanted to run through this as kind of an introduction to what clean tech encompasses. And there's so many things here. So it's very hard to bite it all off, as you can imagine. We try our best on the podcast here, talk to a wide variety of people, but that's where we're at. And we really appreciate you, being part of this process, being part of this movement, to help educate ourselves and educate those around us on what is going on in the clean tech space. If you are interested in learning, there's a lot of great places. We'll put some links into the description, of course, where you can go to learn and read a little bit more about clean tech in general, kind of from a broad perspective. Definitely a lot of resources out there, but it's still something that we all need to continue to learn about and to help kind of focus on these problems, because the thing is, there's a lot of smart people out there who are trying to solve these problems, who have identified the major greenhouse gas emitters, but we're going to need more people. We're going to need people to take jobs in this space to help that, and we're also going to need innovators. So if you're somebody who feel like you're a problem solver and you have an interest in these things, find something that really resonates with you and maybe dig into it. Maybe spend some time on the weekends researching and finding a way that you might be able to help change one of these things, because this is not just one person's problem. This is the entire world's problem. So we hope you enjoy these episodes, what we're creating here. We hope you enjoyed the newsletter. This specifically was created to go in correspondence with our initial newsletter that we're releasing. So we hope you enjoy it. We hope you come back, and we hope you share this with your friends. Again, this is a journey that we're going on, and we're really appreciative of you to be on it with us. But as always, thank you for tuning into this episode, this special episode, and for kind of learning a little bit about what the space is all about. Thank you for subscribing to the newsletter. We really appreciate that. And definitely don't forget to become part of the Slack channel. I think that's a big part, is people need to be able to be exposed to other individuals in the space who are learning just like us, right? I got into this space. I didn't know anything, but it's very important. And I wanted to learn, and I want to help everybody else learn too. So with that, thank you so much for joining in today's episode, and we will see you next time on CleanTechies the Podcast.